What's up, everybody? We're live. How's everybody doing? We're live. Jay Sherer with the Story Geeks, about to jump into a bunch of films that you can watch on Netflix right now. They happen to be geek films, so they're science fiction, fantasy, or comic book related. I do want to see what your comments are about what you think we should be watching on Netflix. A lot of us in the world right now are on some form of quarantine or lockdown, or it's just smart to stay at home. And so that's what we're up to. So if you've got some suggestions, now I will at some point in time go through TV shows as well, do a live show or something like this to go through TV shows. But today I'm just going to talk about movies. So science fiction, fantasy, comic book movies. I'm going to go through that. There's actually an article that I wrote for thestorygeeks.com where I listed these out. I've had that in the description if you want to go check it out. Therefore, if you're thinking like, what, I can't remember what he talked about, just go to thestorygeeks.com and it's like the second article on the page, on the homepage. So you can go check that out. I'm going to go through that. Also, just a couple heads up, we have this coming Tuesday, on our podcast channel. If you don't listen to our podcast, that's where a lot of our content comes from. So you can listen to the Story Geeks podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. We're pretty much everywhere. We have a show coming out that's kind of fun. It's what science fiction and fantasy movies tell us about living through a pandemic. And so we have a whole show coming out on that. Nick Duke and Sandra Demas joined me on that show. Really fun show coming out Tuesday, which is going to be what? March. Today's the 21st. So 24th, is that right? 25th? One of those days. So go check that out. It's a really fun show. It's not just heavy. We talk about some heavy stuff because obviously living in a pandemic is pretty heavy, but we want to distract ourselves as well and have a little bit of fun with it. So we did that too. So it's not too heavy. Today's going to be mostly fun. The other thing I want to let you know about is that we do have a Story Geeks Club. There are two levels of the Story Geeks Club. One is a free level. That's just our Facebook group. It's awesome because there's a bunch of people who like science fiction and fantasy, just like you and me. In that group, all you gotta do is search Facebook for the Story Geeks and then ask to join. Real easy. And if you want to become a VIP member, that's through our Patreon account. Now is the kind of time where we really hope that people could afford to support us because it's getting a little scary out there. And a lot of us don't have full-time jobs. I don't have a full-time job. So if you can support us on there, that would be fantastic. The link to that is in the show notes as well. Links to everything in the show notes. Check it out. In the meantime, let's just jump into, again, these movies that are on Netflix that you can stream right now. I'm going to be looking at my article here, but you can put your movies that are science fiction or fantasy or comic book related, put them in the comments, and we can actually have a little bit of a conversation about them as well. So I have a top 10. It's a little bit more than a top 10. Plus, I have honorable mentions. I'm going to start with the honorable mentions. The first honorable mention I have is actually Back to the Future Part 3. Now, why in the world would I mention Part 3? Well, it's the only one that's on Netflix, I believe. So Netflix is doing this thing where they'll take trilogies and only have like one or two movies from the trilogy in Netflix, which is a little bit of a bummer. But I mean, Back to the Future 3 is an awesome movie. It's just that you should probably watch all three of them like back to back. So anyway, something that you can check out though is Back to the Future 3. If you haven't seen it in a long time, it's a perfect kind of movie to escape the heaviness of the world right now. It's a really fun movie. Back to the Future series is amazing. So definitely check out Back to the Future 3. It's on Netflix right now. Family-friendly movie. I think it's rated PG. So check that before you get into it. The next movie I have on my list is not so family-friendly. It's completely over the top, told in a very noir type way, and it's Frank Miller's Sin City. Now, I really like Sin City. Sin City is a really interesting film. It's very comic book heavy. I mean, it's like you're reading a comic book, but you're watching it, which is, kind of fun. But Sin City is a good one. Go check out Sin City. The next one I have on here is even heavier. It's probably the heaviest movie I have on my list, and that's Event Horizon. Event Horizon is really interesting because not only is it incredibly terrifying, especially if you don't like horror movies. Like, I'm not a big horror fan, but Event Horizon's on there. Event Horizon's good. But it also has a lot to say about our concept of hell. By the way, we also have a podcast on Event Horizon, the Story Geeks podcast. So if you look up the Story Geeks podcast on Event Horizon, we had Chris Hewitt from the Empire podcast, and we dig deep into what exactly is this movie trying to tell us about the nature of hell. Really fascinating conversation. Really liked it. but it's very heavy. So only be prepared for that if you're in a place where you want to think about something heavy. Um, on the list, also as an honorable mention, haven't even gotten the top 10 yet. We got plenty of movies to watch on Netflix, which is awesome. Inglourious Bastards. And the first thought is, wait a minute, is Inglourious Bastards a geek movie? And yes, technically it is, because technically it is alternate history. If you've seen it, you know why. If you haven't seen it, you can figure it out. Again, more of an adult movie. So these last three movies have been all rated R. Oh, I think Sin City's rated R. It might be PG-13, but more adult oriented. But if you like Quentin Tarantino, I'm kind of like, I like some Quentin Tarantino, don't like other Quentin Tarantino. Inglourious Bastards is actually one that I like. It's kind of a fun film, if you can call Tarantino films fun, which I think you can. Solo is the next on the list. Solo is not yet on Disney Plus. It is actually on Netflix right now. I believe there's also a Spanish version on Netflix, if I'm not mistaken. But Solo was a lot more fun than I expected. A lot of people slept on Solo because there was a lot of weirdness happening at that time. Too close to the release of, what was it, The Last Jedi? Way too close to the release of The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi was controversial. That means people didn't know what to do with Solo. Solo is a very fun film. It's worth your time to watch it. If you like Star Wars, like, of course you're watching Solo. You got to do it. So check that out. This is maybe the most controversial film I have on this list, because people hate this film. I love this film. My co-host, Daryl Smith on the Story Geeks podcast, also loves this film. I don't know why we love this film, but Terminator Salvation. I know. Immediately you're like, wait, I want to turn off the video. No, don't do that. I've got other films that you'll like on here. But Terminator Salvation to me is, I don't know, it's really fun. Now, see, for me, a lot of people think that Terminator 2 is the best possible film of the Terminator franchise. I don't think that that's true. I actually like the first Terminator better. So when it comes to me choosing Terminator films, Terminator Salvation actually comes in number 2. I like it better than T2, but I know a lot of people don't. So you can sound off in the comments. Let me know I'm crazy. And I still want to hear your movies. So I want to hear your top 10 movies on Netflix. What are some of the things that you're watching out there? I'll do another TV show live recording of this too, just so you guys have some more things that you can watch, because there's a lot of cool TV shows out there. So should we get into the top 10? Let's get into the top 10. You give me yours. I'll give you mine. If you are not watching this live, just put them in the comments later, and people can go down and scroll down and look and see other opinions as well. So it's not just my opinion. But the thing to stream on Netflix, coming in at number 10, Avengers Infinity War. Now, I also hope you get a chance to watch Endgame, because if you just watch Infinity War at a time like this, where we're experiencing a global pandemic, it can be a kind of an intense place to end. So this would show up higher if we were in a different circumstance. Given the circumstance we're in, if you're a subscriber to Disney Plus and a subscriber to Netflix, like I am, you can watch Infinity War and then go straight into watching Endgame, which solves a lot of the heaviness that occurs. So anyways, that's kind of cool too. We also have we have a whole series of podcasts on Infinity War. So if you want to check out the Story Geeks podcast, you can go hear us talk about Thanos. And we actually compare Thanos to, of all things, the stories that we hear about God in the Old Testament, and whether or not there's a good comparison there, or is it a bad comparison. You got to listen to the podcast. Check it out. This is a very lighthearted movie, highly recommended during a global pandemic. It is The Incredibles 2. The Incredibles 2 is on Netflix right now. You should go check it out. The follow-up to The Incredibles is great. The animation is amazing. Why not check out The Incredibles 2? Pixar does such a good job with storytelling. You guys are all story geeks. You know, and I know we all love storytelling. So yeah, great thing to check out. By the way, I don't know if I'm getting any error messages, but I'm not seeing much in the chat. So again, if you don't have anything to say, totally fine. If you do have some things to say, still put them in the chat, but you might not see them till after the video, or I might not be able to see them, which is a total bummer, because I would like to interact with you. I'll make sure that that's figured out for my TV show episode. So Incredibles 2 was at number 9. At number 8 to stream on Netflix right now, what you can watch right now, another geek movie, Groundhog Day. Why Groundhog Day? Well, it's actually like sort of a time travel movie. It's a fantasy movie, and it's really funny. It's worth a watch because it's actually kind of heartwarming too. So Groundhog Day is a fantastic film to watch right now during a global pandemic. I think a lot of people are going to go back and watch some of these videos and be like, "Wow, they were videoing during a global pandemic, but we're all stuck at home. What else are we going to do?" So, anyways, check that out. Number 7 to stream on Netflix. We just finished our podcast series on this. That podcast series was awesome to talk about, and that was Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King. So definitely check that out. The Lord of the Rings series is phenomenal. First of all, it goes really deep. The storytelling is amazing. Why isn't Return of the King higher on my list? Again, Netflix is doing this weird thing with trilogies. Fellowship of the Ring is not on Netflix. So you've got to go rent Fellowship of the Ring or watch, like my wife and I watched the copy that we had, which is on DVD. So it was not as clear as it should have been. And then we went and watched The Two Towers and The Return of the King on Netflix, just because it was a better quality experience. But they don't have the extended edition. So if you have a lot of time on your hands, like some of us do, because we can't go to work, I actually am working more than ever on the Story Geeks content. But if you don't have as much time, then definitely check those out. Watch the extended editions. I have a link actually on the article too. If you click through the article, I have a link where you can actually buy the complete set of Lord of the Rings and actually help support the show. So if you want to watch Lord of the Rings and you want to watch the extended editions, you want Amazon to ship it to your home, click that link, check it out. Stream on Netflix. Number 6. Blade Runner. So Blade Runner, I mean, if you guys aren't watching Blade Runner is a classic film. Now, it's a little darker. I believe it's rated R, so it's not like a family film necessarily. But Blade Runner is kind of quintessential for showcasing what LA was going to look like in the future. It's classic film. Another Harrison Ford film for fans of Harrison Ford like me. It's great to check out. We actually did 2 podcasts, kind of an extended podcast divided into 2 on Blade Runner. There's a link to that podcast on the article, which you can click to from here again, where we talk about like, what is this movie about? And a lot of this movie is about like what it means to be human. And that's just a really fascinating topic that you can dive deeper into if you watch Blade Runner. Then you can go watch the camera's moving because my dog is rolling up against it. Sorry about that. That's pretty funny. You start to see anyways, moving on. I didn't move the camera. The dog did. It wasn't an earthquake. My dog moved the camera. Coming in at number 5. You can't control live shows, folks. Coming in at number 5 on Netflix that you should stream. This was apparently controversial because one of my cousins, when I said that, when I shared this article, was coming after me on this one. But was Hook, the movie Hook. A lot of you may have not have seen Hook. It came out, I believe, during the 90s at some point in time. So when I was a kid, when I was probably like a young preteen or teenager, Hook was, I thought, a great movie. I think when it first came out, people were thinking like, okay, Peter Pan is Disney and therefore it's going to be a certain way. Hook isn't necessarily like that. Hook is a little, no, I wouldn't call it adult because it's not adult, but it's a little bit more serious. It's a little bit more serious of a take. But Hook is a really good film in retrospect. Don't expect the Disney version, clearly, but it's also really fun to see Robin Williams again because he was such a talented dude. So to see him in this context is fantastic, and I highly recommend it. Keep moving down through the list. Coming in at number 4, The Dark Knight. Of course, you got to watch The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is on Netflix. Batman Begins is also on Netflix, so you can go 1, 2. The Dark Knight Rises is not on Netflix. You have to go find that somewhere else. I have links to places where you can buy these too if you go to the article. So if you want to buy them, like that's another way of checking this out. But The Dark Knight is still one of my favorite comic book movies of all time. It is fantastic. Highly recommend you check it out. Really great storyline, lots of complexity. Heath Ledger as the Joker is one of my favorite performances in the history of cinema. So definitely go check it out. I mean, if you got a Netflix subscription, why not binge it? It's awesome. And we did a podcast on that as well. You can go back to that. We talk about whether or not Joker is an atheist. Of course, on our podcast, we get really deep into things. So you can go listen to that. Also, just stream on Netflix. We're going to stay in the Nolan verse, if you will, the Christopher Nolan movie verse. Christopher Nolan continues to be one of the best filmmakers of our time, I think. Tenet looks like it's going to be awesome. I don't know if we're going to be in theaters to see Tenet, but we'll see. We'll see if the theaters open back up by the time Tenet comes out. But is Inception, phenomenal film. If you haven't seen Inception and you got Netflix, go watch Netflix, go watch Inception. Inception is great. One of the things that I would highly encourage you to do too is we don't get a lot of celebrities. We have a lot of film critics on our podcast because we're friends with a lot of film critics, which is fantastic. We don't get a lot of celebrities on the podcast necessarily. We haven't reached out to a bunch of them, but one celebrity that we did get to have on our podcast about Inception is actually Dilip Rao, who plays Yusuf in Inception. So if you want to hear him talk a little bit more about making the film and all the things that happened on the film, plus digging deeper into what this film actually means, it is a great podcast. A link to that podcast is in the article. A link to the article is in the description down below. Just two more things for you to watch on Netflix. Like I said, I want to know what you are watching on Netflix. Please leave those comments down below. I know, for example, people would say, I Am Mother, I think people have said is really good. There's Spectre. There's a number of geek things. I'm going to have to cough in a minute. Excuse me. There's a number of geek things on Netflix that you can definitely check out that I have not seen yet that I definitely want to watch. So leave yours in the comments down below. But number 2 to stream on Netflix, next to The Dark Knight, this is probably one of my best comic book movies of all time. I may even have to put it above The Dark Knight at some point. I don't know. But it's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. The fact that this is on Netflix means you have to watch it. A lot of people slept on this movie, I think, because they saw that it was animation and they were like, oh, it's animation. It's about Miles Morales. People are not as familiar with Miles Morales, but guess what? There are other versions in the Spider-Verse of Spider-Man, so it's not just Miles Morales. There's more Spider-Man and actually some Spider-Women too in there. And it is a fantastic film. The animation is spectacular. It may be my favorite animated movie of all time. I mean, Pixar's got some great animation as well, so that's going to be, I don't know. It's awesome, though. You got to watch it. Which brings me to Gatsby just hit the camera again. Now my number one, and my number one is totally cheating. Daryl on the podcast always makes fun of me for this. But number one on the podcast is the Indiana Jones trilogy of films. Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, The Last Crusade. All of those films are on Netflix right now. They are can't miss films. You got to go watch those films. I might just binge all 3 of them again if I have time. Like I said, I've been working a lot, but if I have time, I actually might go binge those films because those films are so good. And actually, we haven't really done any podcasts on them yet. So maybe that's the next podcast, is to do something like that. Again, what I would love to hear from you is, what movies are you watching on Netflix? If you're binging a bunch of stuff and you want to leave those in the comments, please do that. For some reason, I don't think my comments are working. So I apologize for that. But leave your comments so that when people watch this video, they can scroll down to the comments and see what else you've said that we should watch on Netflix right now. In the meantime, that's basically going to close out this video for me. Hopefully you enjoy all the things that I talked about and that you'll enjoy binging them. Netflix has this thing called Watch Party now too. You have to Google it, but basically you can watch movies together. So there's no reason why we have to be so isolated that we can't hang out together and do some of this stuff. That's why Daryl did a live show in our Facebook group yesterday. Free to join that. That's why I'm doing this live show today. But yeah, leave me a like. Hopefully you like this show. Check it out and let us know exactly what you think we should be watching on Netflix. Take it easy, guys.